perspective and why you've come to that conclusion. So who wants to go first?
I say that they're born because what we are is more than who we are. You see, because of where we come from. So all of the ancestors and all the people that are now inside of us, they gave birth to the leader that we are or not.
But everybody was born. So what makes those that become leaders?
We don't all have the same ancestors. And our ancestors didn't have the same experiences.
Okay.
And even in the same family, even though we may have the same ancestors in the same family, which one of those ancestors are showing up that have become a part of us?
Right.
And which ones are we calling on?
Okay.
Because I think that has an influence on.
How do we know that? Okay, so does it reason out that someone you're considering to be a leader, if we went back and look at their family line, would there be other leaders then in that family? You say so?
I say so.
So if we look at the leaders we've got on the poster, which I counted them, they're about 13 in a period of, let's say, 6,000 years. So you're saying Martin Luther King, for example, if we took him, there were other leaders in his family. So that means that because he was from that bloodline, he would be a leader? Is that because...
I would say yes, the bloodline would influence it.
Right.
Because there's a tapestry of genetics that are in this pool that he comes from.
Right.
Yeah. And so there's that, and then there's the influence outside of that.
Okay.
You with me?
I'm with you.
Okay. So I say yes from the genetic pool, but also that genetic pool also pulls in information that is not a part of that pool. Does that make sense?
From that particular DNA bank of the family.
Yes.
Okay.
So like in an example, us being here with you in this space,
right,
that's going to influence who we become from here.
Right.
You see, there's nothing to do with our genetic pool.
Right. Okay. All right, let's go over to the other side. So you feel that leaders are made?
I do.
And yeah.
And I think that their environment and how they're brought up and what they experience leads them into that position to become a leader.
Right.
So even though I know they have to have some sort of a base in order to be able to do that. I think everybody.
Okay, so
that base.
The funny thing is, when we're presented with situations, a lot of times we take the approach of there's only one or the other. When in actuality, it can be neither all of them or one of them. Do you follow me? So, for example, a lot of the times we forget about the puppet master, right? So there's always someone or something there that is controlling or pulling the strings of the choices, right? This is where the notion of multiple choices. So this is choice 1, choice 2, choice 3. And when we're given choices, we tend to just stick. So we say, our leader's born or our leader's made. And we do this. We leave out all the other choices that are possible. So, for example, what came first, the chicken or the egg?
So you're saying they're born and they're made.
Absolutely.
I agree.
Right?
I agree too.
So a lot of times we do that where we are like, okay, and then we get stuck in the loop. Because if you're asked what came first, is it the chicken or the egg? I guarantee someone's going to say the egg. I guarantee someone's going to say the chicken. And you say, well, how did the chicken come about? Well, it came from the egg. How did the egg come about? Came from the chicken. So you're stuck in a loop. And most people don't look outside to the puppet master, because whoever is giving you the choices is leaving out a lot of information which hinders your growth or your choices, right? So if you then bring a different element to is it the chicken or the egg? Now, if you're trapped within just thinking that's all there is to choose from, you're never going to get out of the box. Then we say, where did the chicken come from? As in the origin of a chicken. So a chicken was born from something. It just didn't just come to be. And when you do the research going backwards, you're going to find out that the chicken's related to the dinosaur. So now the question is, which one came first is redundant, because this comes from this, which comes from this, which comes from this, which comes from this, which comes from this. So you have to put the whole perspective into play to realize that you have to go beyond this. And this is going to make even more sense when you go to a shop to buy some shoes, let's say, and you spend the time choosing between 4 pairs of shoes. I like that one. No, I like that one. I like that one. And eventually you make a choice. But you didn't make a choice. Whoever put the 4 pairs of shoes there already knew you were going to choose one of these 4. But you think you made the choice. And this goes all the way in the hierarchy when we start to look at the whole God and religious concept. Because most people will start off with a beginning. And they will say God, or whatever name they want to use for that deity, and to say God is responsible for the creation. But you say, is it creation? And what is the difference between creation and being made? Because it said God made man in his image and likeness. To make something is not the same as to create something. So that alone makes you think, because God is the puppet master in this case, because is God good or bad? At that stage when you're looking at this, most people will say God is good. So if God created you in his image and likeness, or Adam and Eve, let's say, they have to be good. Because if they're not good, they're not in the image of God. And if they're bad, then whose image would that be in? Because the devil doesn't exist at that point. Do you follow me? So even the whole thing about Adam and Eve, like, they don't give you the age they were created at. Did you follow what I'm saying? How old was Adam and Eve when they were created originally? Because they don't tell you. We know here that a child is born and the child comes out as a baby. So when was she created a baby? Because they don't tell you that. And was he created a baby at that point? Because who nurtured her? You know, where did Adam get his navel, the belly button, from? So what I'm saying is, a lot is left out, but you get trapped in the puppet master pulling the strings, and until you start to question, where did the puppet master come from? Where did God come from? And then all of a sudden, you open up all types of questions, because the only way you know about God is what God is telling you in, check this out, the book. Because you learn everything about God, Allah, Yahweh, or whatever name you want to use for a deity, you learn that in the book. And that's another thing, because the book becomes the puppet master. Because if it's not in that book, then you can't accept it or subscribe to it. So people in religion, in religious sects and all, you know, like monotheistic religions, they will say, whether it's the Quran, the Bible, if you don't fall within the confines of the book, the Quran, then you're not part of us. You're not a Muslim. And only what is said in that book. And then you start saying, but there's a lot missing that's not in that book that we experience in life every day. You don't find AI in the book. You don't find the internet in the book. You don't find smart mobile phones in the book. There are many things that you're seeing in life that's not in the book. So how can the book be from God, who knows and governs everything, to govern your life? Because there are many things not in the book. So then you're like, where did the book come from? So you can keep going backwards, and then you realize that these religious books come from other books, which come from other books, which come from other books. And so you have to, I need something to wipe. You have to always go back to the source, to the root. Yeah, if you don't mind grabbing some. You go back to the root, and the root never stops. It only stops for the people, or people that start at a particular point. So, thank you. So that if you want to go backwards, you have to expose the puppet master, and you have to go beyond what you've been told. And a lot of people don't think that they can, because they've been told don't question and don't look any further or beyond what we've given you.
So how do we use this information about the puppet in regards to relationships?
In regard to relationships, that's a very, very good question. The first thing to do, relationships, the first thing to do is realize this is how it starts, right? That's the puppet master right there. Because the word you're using, it's a language. And whatever language that is, it's already dictating to you what this means.
Help us to understand what that word is. What are we saying when we use that word?
Right, that's what I'm saying. Literally, you're saying the word relate. Who do you relate with? And you may not relate to someone because they are completely in a different tree to you. So if your makeup genetically is different from others, you can't relate. In a relationship, you have to say, who is teaching us how to relate? Yeah, because it's like another word, family. What makes somebody family? We can say blood or DNA, but if you study the word family is really about people you're familiar with.
Mm-hmm.
Because you can be familiar with somebody that is not in your DNA blood family. We can relate to each other more than maybe someone in your or in my bloodline or my immediate bloodline anyway. So what makes someone familiar is the things that you relate. So if you have a particular, let's think about things that cause people problems in relationships. One of the top things is going to be, and you're the specialist in this, communication. That's why I said about the language, because when you start to look at language, why do I speak the way I speak? Who taught me that this is what I should use to relate to you or communicate with you? Yeah? Communion, to come together in common, we're common, in common. When you say community, common unity or communication, it's all about how do we connect with each other? And what I'm speaking is foreign to me, because if I go back, as you're saying, to the root, I didn't speak like this. Somebody taught me this, and there's a tone, there's a vibration, there's a frequency. And does that frequency resonate with you? Because if you didn't speak English, we wouldn't relate. There will be a miscommunication, because I will be missing the tones you're hearing, would not connect with what you can resonate with.
So what's happening in a relationship when people do speak the same language?
They think they're speaking the same language. This is why I keep coming back to this English thing, right? Because in English, you can have one word that can have over 5,000 different meanings for that one word. So when I'm saying a word to you, in your mind, you might be, picking one of those 5,000. So what does that say?
I see word in there.
Okay, but what does it say? See what you see and what you hear, and this is where your so-called five senses come in. You only have one sense, which has been exaggerated to five, where you say you see, you hear, you smell, you taste, and you touch. But really, you only have the one, which is touch. Touch, which is perception. So when you're seeing something is different to when you're touching it or feeling it. Now, I could swap this letter. If this one letter has changed the entire thing. So English is the problem, because I can have a dialogue with you. Let's just anything. How are you today?
Mm-hmm.
I want you to respond.
Oh.
Yeah, I would like you to respond.
I'm fine.
You're fine.
Uh-huh.
Okay. What does it mean when you say I am fine? What is fine? Because remember, fine can be a fine, as in
Mine.
I'm fining you $100 for doing something wrong. But you said I am fine, meaning you may mean my health is fine, because you're looking at the word fine as being good, right?
Mm. But if we're speaking the same language,
Right.
and we're understanding the words to be the same,
But that's what I'm saying. They're not.
Communicating.
Because one word, I just gave you an example. Fine, to me, means fine, as in a fine. It could mean something completely different. So in a relationship, two people are speaking and they're not able to comprehend what they're saying to each other. And it causes arguments, because the female has more of a emotional connection to things. So when you're saying something, they're hearing something different to what you think you're communicating. You see, so when we say that the English is the problem, you have to go back to what is our language, because we didn't speak English before. You see, we spoke our language, Mispatia, Sabaik or Nawapik, which is the whole problem that we're having on the planet right now. If you're following God and what God was saying, right, you're dealing with the book in Genesis chapter 11, when literally God said, let's go down and confine their language so they will not be able to communicate with each other anymore. And that's what happened, where they talk about the Tower of Babel, but it wasn't about the tower, it was about the language. The tower was just a transmitter or something that was receiving these tones and vibrations and frequencies from what people call God, which were these Anunnaki that were in what they call heaven, but a craft called Nibiru. You see, so communication is one of the problems in relationships, because people don't communicate well because the tone, the vibration, the words they're using are throwing them off. But now, if we both went to school, and it's almost like every word you say, the other person needs to know what it is you mean by what you're saying, for you to then be aligned in terms of, okay, you hear people say, I said that, but I actually meant this. And you get the phrase, well, say what you mean and mean what you say. Because if not, males and females, they communicate differently. They see things differently. They feel things differently. So we have to be aware that to break the spell, because the spell is the problem, because people are under a spell. It's a hypnotic spell, which is to do with words. And we just add ing to the end and say spellings of words. And you have to ask yourself, why is English so widely spoken and used worldwide? Why English?
Confusion.
Yeah, confusion. That's what Babel means. So when I mention the Tower of Babel, the word Babel, or to babble, is to be confused. So the title of the book is called the Bible, and that comes from that word Babel as well. Babylon, Babiel, Babel. And to babble means to confuse. So when you look at the cover of the book, it says the Holy Bible. And then you ask, what does the word holy mean? What does the word the, T-H-E, mean? The, holy. This is how Wu-Sabat is. Like, we have to dissect everything, because this is where the problem is. You ask people, what do these three words mean? The, it's like a definite article, like the only thing, or like very important, or the. Holy means pure, undiluted, pure. And then we've already established Bible comes from Babel, which means confusion. So you're literally saying to people the pure confusion. And then they read it and they're confused because it doesn't make sense, because you're starting off with a lie. You're starting off with a lie, telling people this is pure and it's unpure. You're starting off with a translation. A translation can't be the original or the pure words. Then you're saying this is the word of God. And you're saying that God is all-knowing, all-wise, all-right, all-exact. But God is already there telling you this is the beginning of something when it's not the beginning. Do you follow me?
I do.
It's not the beginning, because how is it saying the first line, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth? And then you say, this is why I say English is confusion, because when you say in the beginning, that's completely separate from being at the beginning. And God cannot be in the beginning, because you're told God is everywhere and is omnipresent and omnipotent. So how can he be in something? Where is he in? A place called heaven. right?
That's contained.
But even before that, who is telling you the story? Because it says in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth and blah, 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 and this happened and that happened. People don't stop and say, well, who is talking? Because it's not God talking, because that person is telling you about God, about what God did and how we did it. And it took him 6 days to do it. But yet he can click his fingers and do it in an instant. So why take 6 days?
So what?
And then he needs to rest. So he gets tired. You know, we can pick these little things out. This is just the cover and the first line. And then you start to see the confusion, because by the time you even just get past Genesis, you're confused, because it talks about him putting a tree in the garden. The tree what's the purpose of the tree? To give you knowledge of good and evil. So who created evil? God. Because he created everything in the beginning. And no one else was around. So they say. Until you start to say, who was he speaking to in the beginning? Because he says, in the beginning was the word and da 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 da. But it's like, who is he talking to? If he's not speaking to anyone, then people, like later on, they say, oh, he was speaking to Jesus. But then Jesus wasn't born yet. And by the time you start to read the Bible, you say, Adam and Eve were made from the ground, of the dust of the ground, and they then had children, Cain and Abel. Cain kills Abel, and then he's afraid people are going to kill him. You're like, which people are going to kill him? So you're already confused. This is before you even get to like the Noah story and the other stories of the flood and so on. Because before that, you get to this character called the devil, who God created. People say, no, God did not create the devil. He became evil later on because he was an angel. So that means God didn't know what he was creating. If God allowed the devil to become the devil, then he allowed that to happen. And then now in the world, everyone makes the devil as powerful as God. Or more powerful, in fact. Because if God and the devil are not equal, and God is more powerful than the devil, then God should be able to get rid of the devil. But for some reason, he takes a backseat and lets the devil run rampant on the planet. All the disease, the evils, the wickedness, all the things that are happening on the planet. If you say God is responsible for that, religious people will say, no, he's not. And then they will say, it's the devil's fault. And you say, so God can't get rid of the devil? And if he can, why doesn't he? They will make up excuses for God and say things like, oh, he needs to test you so that he will know whether or not you're going to go to heaven or go to hell. Places he created again. What's the purpose? Excuse me. What's the purpose of him creating a place called hell? If he already knows that you're going to go to hell, why not just stop you from going to hell? Why not just click his fingers and make everything, change everything to be good? Because the puppet master will not be able to keep pulling the wool over your eyes, over the choices that you're given, good and bad, left and right. So I hope that helped, but I'm going to answer the other question about, so you were gonna say something just now?
Yeah, it's about.
We can go back to the relationship as well. Yeah, go ahead.
So based on what you said, my understanding is that the beginning of a relationship starts in a confused state.
Yes.
Because we're not able to communicate because of the language that we use.
Correct. Go on, I'm listening. And because this is another word.
So what is it how do we start a relationship?
Right. You start relationship. A lot of people don't actually take the time to get to know each other. Really get to know each other before they get into a point of thinking they can relate to each other.
So let's give it another word, or help me with this. So we're not even talking about a relationship because that hasn't been established.
No.
We're just talking about two people coming together with the intention of being in a relationship.
Right.
But without the understanding that it's not organic.
Right. Because people, look at this program, but what people don't see is program me. So you've been programmed from the minute you arrive here, from your parents, who obviously are the initial your initial caretakers. So when we were saying about the leaders, going back to the leaders, you're saying, is it nature? Yeah, you have these two words. Is it nature or is it nurture? Yeah, nurture. And this word nature goes back to ancient Egypt, where we use the word naturu. But even that word is a rendition of our ancestor known as Pa-Natharu, right? This is why the root is always so important, because natural nature does things by way of, as you say, is the energies. So you got two energies, but are those energies compatible? And how do most people get into relationships? A lot of the times it's through programming, where they meet in a club or in some setting and they get talking, but they don't really get to know the nature of each person properly. And the nature ties into much, much more than the physical, because a lot of the times it's physical attraction. Because energy, when we're talking about energy, you have attracting or attraction, pulling, and there's a force. You're pushing and pulling, contraction and expansion. This is why everything starts off with that pulsation. Yeah, you can look at it as a wave, because a wave goes up and down, or breathing in and out. Everything has that pulsation. So that, are you vibrating on the same wavelengths? That's what people will say. Most people deal with the physical first. And today, 95%, when you look at a person, especially the young females, 95% is not real, in terms of fake hair, fake eyebrows, fake eyelashes, fake lips, fake boobs, fake what they call them? What they call them? BBLs. Yeah. And I'm not just having a go at the females, because a lot of the males are responsible, because the female, going back to the attraction, because it's like magnets, right? Attraction. But people don't realize that a magnet is not like you have a metal, yeah? The magnetism is not in the metal. It's something that the metal can conduct. You see? So they give you all these things like two magnets, yeah? What do they say? Opposite attract. That's backwards. This is why we are starting off wrong, because you're saying opposites attract. So you're starting off saying on a like. You see the game? So really it should be we're both on a plus. Then we attract. But they've messed it up. So what I'm saying is that most people start with the physical, what you look like, not what your mental, because you got physical, you got the mental, the spiritual. There are many aspects to your being that two people don't get to learn and know about before they get into what you call a relationship. Because when you start to look at the mentality or the spiritual aspect of a person, you might not agree on things. So a lot of the time people just look at, she looks physically attractive, or, they have.
So you do. Okay.
So you get caught up in the It's all right. You can use a computer. Yeah.
Sorry, that's you, and I didn't recognize.
Yes. All right. physical attraction leads to the problem because we put the sex first, and the sex is what leads to offspring. So you're already starting, going back to what we were saying, nurture or nature or nurture, where that newborn being, if they're not already groomed by the parents who are themselves aligned with each other, the problem starts from there. And then you come into the programming. And so we have to go back to which culture are you following? Because different cultures do different things in terms of relationships. So, you know, you have like, say, the Asians who will do like things like arranged marriages and things like that, because a lot of that actually comes from us, as going back to the Nataru or the Natharu, our ancestors would study a person and see who they would be compatible with and bring the two people together, because what you're trying to do is bring offspring, right? Offspring that is going to come in this world, and we call these offspring supreme beings. So to be a supreme being, yeah, you have to behave and act like a supreme being, but you have to be taught that. And this is why most of our relationships are failing, because we're not looking at things from that perspective.
So it sounds like you're saying that a relationship is more than just hanging out or being with a person, that it has purpose.
Right. Yeah.
And that we should understand that purpose before going into that relationship.
Absolutely. So when you meet somebody and I did this quite recently. I asked somebody, what is your blood type? And they thought that question was crazy. But if you don't know a person's blood type and you're coming together, you can have incompatible blood types, which can lead to you having a child that may have sickle cell. And that's just something as simple as that. How many people do you see meet in a club, and they go, oh, so what's your blood type? No one thinks about that. They just look at, she's got a fat booty, he's got nice eyes, muscles, few drinks, maybe, you know, a spliff, weed, whatever. Boom. Sex comes into it. And sex is the gateway to bringing beings into this world. And that sex, when you start looking at the phonetics, it's also, remember, 6. 666. Look out for, we're gonna go into this Leviathan, because this is what's causing all of this. Yeah, 666, the Leviathan, the beast, as the Antichrist. Yeah. So you have to remember there's an agenda to stop you having a union with the right beings, the right entities, the right energies that are going to bring about supreme beings, because supreme beings know what to do and how to think and what this is all about. So what Wu-Sabat does is all the knowledge, all the information. I mean, we've got things like here, who is God, female or male? Now, most people have been given, in fact, even, is there a God? These are the questions that we ask so that people can read and study to start to see the game that's being played. And yeah, relationships are so important, because the future generations rely on the right two people coming together. Because with us anyway, if you only need 2 people, one male, one female, to continue our life. And if there was only 2 people left on the planet, they could start all over again. So this is why it is really important to be aware of that programming, because you're literally saying, program me as a computer system You have to program it to function or do what it needs to do. Now we're calling it AI. Everything is geared towards being artificial, not natural, not based on natural nature. So natural nature does its thing, and that's what we need to return back to, like really thinking about what we're doing when we come together in a relationship. And you asked a question earlier on about which books should you read, where should you start, and the way I explained it is that, if you have you have to have a picture of, like when you get a puzzle, I'll just do anything simple. Let's say this is the puzzle that you're trying to build, but when you take it apart into lots of different pieces, the books help you to build that puzzle in a way that whatever book you get might only build a part of the puzzle, and you might start another puzzle over there. But once you know the picture in the beginning, what you're trying to get to and achieve, then you know where you're going, and then you start to read the right books that give you parts of the puzzle. And that's not just physically, it's also, the puzzle is you rebuilding your mind, getting rid of the crap that you've been kind of like fed with the programming from the time you were born, so that by the time you're an adult, you're making decisions based on right knowledge, right wisdom, and right understanding. You're not making decisions based on, she's got green eyes, so let's get together. But what causes someone to have green eyes? Or blue eyes? Is that a positive, is that a good thing, or is that a bad thing? Is that a healthy thing or an unhealthy thing? And when you start to look at melanin and neuromelanin and what causes your eye color and the formation of your being and your brain, this all ties back into nature. So leaders, if you read the Man from Planet Risk book, leaders are born, but the environment you're in also has a massive impact. If you were living in Gaza right now, no matter how much, how smart you are, if bombs are dropping every day and you're just living amongst rubble and ruins, you're going to have less of an environment that's conducive for your well-being than if you're living in another place where there's peace and harmony, you see. So it is a combination of having natural selection by way of your DNA and the environment that you're in as well. That has a massive impact.
So could you talk a little bit about, going back to the puzzle?
Yeah.
This is what I see as a woman, wanting to be in a relationship, wanting to be married, wanting to have children.
Right.
That's my picture of my puzzle.
Right.
So now there's the small pieces to get me there.
But the puzzle, the first thing you have, this is why a lot of women are delusional, because the picture they're painted as a child. Remember, as a child, you're given dolls to play with, you watch Cinderella and you think about what you would like from a man, and women are given this impression that there is a specific man in the world, especially the Adam and Eve story, designed for them. And that man exists somewhere, and they're going to grow up, find this knight in shining armor, Prince Charming, and he's going to be there to do everything for them, right? He's going to give them all his money, only care about them, won't look at another woman as being attractive. It's just all about her, right? So she's got that picture painted from a very young age. And then she grows up, and most women are waiting for this Mr. Right, this one man that's been specifically designed for them. And by doing that, they don't really consider the man's perspective. So a man is made naturally to find females attractive. Now, what makes you think he can only see you as attractive? Before we even get into the dynamics of the society you live in that dictates how many wives you should have and so on and so forth. And even biblically, And we're not trying to encourage men to do that. If you want to be with one woman and that's it, that's fine. But then the Bible tells you Abraham had more than one wife. In the Bible, Hagar, Sarah, Keturah, Moses, Solomon, you can name them, that Jesus even had more than one wife. But I'm saying that to say, if your picture as a young girl is there's only one man for me, a man can only have one woman, then when you're in a situation where the man starts to say maybe find another woman attractive or whatever, you cannot deal with that because you've been groomed to think that there's no way he should find anybody else attractive but me, you see. And men too, I'm not going to just be like, men don't know what a man is or what the responsibilities of a man are. So we have everything we talk about. The master teacher Pandit Abhyanan has actually put out a book. So we have the Nwapian man or the Sabian man, which teaches young men how to be men, and then they get groomed and they go through certain schools. And we have the Gospel of Yanun on the Sacred Feminine, which now, because we're starting over again in terms of coming away from the Western programming and living our culture and teaching people about genetics, teaching young people about what happens when you exchange bodily fluids, because the personalities and the beings that you're taking into yourself, women are internal beings, males are external beings. So our phallus comes out, it's elongate, and the female's internal, where everything goes in. So she takes in a lot of these, elements that may come from the person they're mixing with and the partners that they've had and so on and so forth. So it actually affects their brain as females. So when you're saying, it's a very complex thing when we're dealing with relationships, because when two people get together, they have to realize it's not just the two of them. It's their ancestors going back 4 generations on either side, with all those personalities having their own 30 personalities. So you really have to work at the intentions behind why you're getting together. Is it for offspring? Is it for companionship? Is it just for us to grow and build together to fuse and become soulmates? And this is where we actually have a part of that called soulmates, because it's become, why are we getting together? It's become more about what you see on TV. You have all these reality shows that tell women what it is to be a woman. So social media, and you have parents that are children themselves trying to raise children. So there's a lot when it comes to relationship and being able to relate to someone. And if you're growing together in Wu-Sabat, that's another key element. You're dealing with growth. And if one person outgrows the other because they're not putting work into themselves, because once the female gets married, they feel like they've achieved their goal, as in, okay, I got a house, I got a husband, I've got, the children, I've got money in the bank. So they've got what they want, but they may not have the man, because now the man is not getting what he wants from the relationship, or vice versa. But I'm just saying it's more the females that I saw a video that actually made me think of a female saying men getting married, because most people don't want, the idea of marriage now is going out of the window. Most people don't want to commit and get married because, she was saying that, what do you get from getting married that you didn't have before? Because if you had your freedom before, if you could play around or whatever, if you could go where you want to go, do what you want to do, prior to marriage, and then you get married, and if you get divorced, you lose everything, or you lose half, or she was asking the question, and it did make me think, because the perception and what people have been programmed about relationships and getting together and getting married is not what, if you go back generations, our ancestors did. They were very smart in terms of why they were coming together, and it was much more of a commitment. And this is what we need to get back to, because if not, the generations are just getting more and more materialistic. They don't really take time to get to know each other. I mean, social media alone, it's like there's no courting, not really getting to know the families, so
So it sounds like what you're saying is the hookup
yeah,
is keeping you hooked
exactly. That's
from
right.
being a supreme being.
Yes. So in Wu-Sabat, we don't have boyfriends and girlfriends. Because think about it, what is that? Because if you are an adult, as they say, going back to what I was saying about the 6, right? They say you're an adult at 18, which is not a coincidence either. Because 18 is what? 666. 8 plus 6 is 12, plus 6 is 18. So they make sure that everything is based on this 6 and the sex, because as an adult, if at 18 you've had multiple boyfriends, multiple girlfriends, you've already exchanged so much different fluids, taken on so many spirits and personalities that are going to affect your mind to the point where by the time you're ready to get married, remember, this is 18. So by 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, your mental state is already so messed up, both male and female, to the point where now you want to settle down and get married, but you have all these issues from all the mixtures of DNA and everything that you've taken in.
Remind us again, when you say mixtures of DNA, where does that come from?
Boyfriends, if you have
from multiple, every time you have sex.
Yeah. In fact, not just sex, a kiss. So we have an actual fact called genetic kiss, because the DNA is in the saliva, it's in the liquid. So even the kiss, this is why they invented the French kiss, because who decided that? You don't see any animals in nature doing that, because the tongue and your mouth is where you're taking in there's lots of bacteria and all kinds of stuff. So exchanging fluids is very dangerous.
And that's genetic material.
Yes.
That are being
Yeah, because remember, during COVID or whenever you have these shows where they're trying to establish who's the father of the child, what they do, they take a swab and they take just a little bit of your saliva to do the DNA testing. The same with COVID, you just had to do the swab so your genetic material is already in the liquids in your body. Yeah, so when you look at relationships from a scientific perspective and the minds coming together and all of that type of thing, it just goes beyond the physical. Yeah, so this is what's happening, a lot of us. And then when you decipher a person, you have a situation where a physical man can have a female spiritual body, and a female physical body can have a male spirit. So this is where the whole, LGBT and all these stuff's coming in, because physically you look like a man, but spiritually you're a woman, or a feminine, shall I say. So you act and feel and behave like a feminine in the inside. So this is where people try to be like, I feel like a woman, so I'm going to change my physical appearance to match how I feel. Or the other way around. A woman feeling like they're a man because they have a male spirit, and they try to change their physical appearance to match how they feel on the inside, because they can't explain what's going on. But in Wu-Sabat, we explain about, you can have a physical male body and have a spirit that's a female. And this is where the confusion comes in with. Then you have those who are just like oversexed, or just like will sleep with anything, male, female, animals, whatever. Where you get the term, being a nymphomaniac from, because it's not, they don't really care. And then you got those that get confused by these people that are acting and behaving in this way. So yeah, we take it seriously in terms of relationships. Of course, we're looking at the future. So the younger people coming up, they've got to now be groomed and taught this information. Whereas a lot of the older folks, because we may have already been in the world and done some of these things, the best we can do is clean up ourselves inside out and try to pass that knowledge to the younger people so that the offspring in the future, really, every generation should be an improvement on the previous generation. So whatever I achieve, my children should do better than me and their children should do better than them. But we have a situation now where the young people are going the other way, where they're not listening to their parents and they're not trying to, hear anything you got to say because of the world they live in. And there shouldn't be a situation where, you're degenerating. But we're seeing that happening with our young people. The way they dress, the way they talk, the way they deal with things is not the way we need to be to bring about supreme being. So that all begins with the relationships. And there is a shortage of men because a lot of our men are in jail or in prison or, taking their own lives based on all this programming. You see, so yeah, Wu-Sabat is here to basically deal with every aspect of our lives. And so when you're putting that, as you were saying, that puzzle together as a young person, you need to have parents, because again, as you know, with words, the master explains to us, parents is just someone that you're renting for a period of time. Because after a while, you're going to become what they call an adult at 18 or whatever that stipulation is in that country, and you're going to go off. But before you get to what they're calling an adult, the parents have to be responsible for how they groom and the knowledge they pass on to them, so that when they go and meet or join in with someone else, they're already groomed to a point where they're responsible beings.